Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the press conference following the European Council summit. We'll start with remarks by the President of the European Council, Charles Michel.
Bonsoir à chacune et à chacun. Nous avons clôturé un sommet, un Conseil européen qui a été l'occasion de prendre des décisions sur des sujets difficiles et importants. You know that this morning we had the honor and the pleasure to have a meeting with President Zelensky. It was the occasion for President Zelensky to present its victory plan and the occasion for the leaders to have an exchange of views with him. A few points are extremely important. No one is underestimating the momentum. The geopolitical context is extremely difficult on the one hand. There will be elections in the United States in a few weeks on the other hand. And it's why it's so important to send a very clear message of support for the people of Ukraine. They need more military support. This is urgent. They need more financial support. And we intend to deliver on the promises we made in the framework of the G7 a few months ago. You know that we are working on this financial package, $50 billion in total, and we intend to deliver our share, and we expect that the others will follow our example. With Zelensky this morning, we also had the occasion to discuss the state of play within the international community. We support the efforts with the Just Peace formula, and we understand how this is still very important to be in close contact with all the partners across the world, not only the like-minded partners, but to explain that if we want to defend the international law and the international humanitarian law, if we want to defend the UN Charter, we have to be consistent and to support Ukraine and to condemn this Russian invasion. This is the first point I wanted to mention, Ukraine, and you've seen that we have again clear conclusions on this important topic. The second topic I would like to mention is the Middle East. Once again, I want to repeat that we condemn this terrorist attack launched by Hamas the 7th of October last year. We want the release of all hostages, and we also accept and recognize and affirm the right for Israel to exist and to defend itself in line and in accordance with the international law. And you know that we want to do everything to stop this regional escalation, and that's why we want ceasefires in Gaza, in Lebanon. We condemn the attacks against the UNIFIL in Lebanon. We ask the respect for the UN resolutions, and it was again the occasion today to reaffirm our full support for the two-state solution, because we think that the two-state solution will be the best security guarantee. We do not underestimate all the challenges, all the obstacles, but we think that we have a role to play together with our partners in the region and beyond to have more influence and to make sure that we can be a more influential actor in that region. We also had the occasion to express our support for the United Nations, including for the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, and we commend the role that's played by UNRWA. And finally, I would like to add, it's not in the conclusions, but some leaders made the point in relationship with the association agreement we have with Israel. And you know that a debate has started at the level of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs on that topic. I have no doubt that we'll continue this debate in the weeks to come. Enfin, un troisième point, la migration est un défi qui concerne tous les Européens. Nous avons des frontières extérieures qui sont en réalité des frontières communes pour l'ensemble de l'Union européenne. On a eu un débat extrêmement approfondi. Alors je mesure bien qu'il est classique, après une conférence de presse du Conseil européen, de dire qu'on a eu un débat très approfondi. J'ai vraiment envie de mettre en évidence la qualité de ce débat, parce que pour avoir participé maintenant depuis pratiquement 10 ans à des réunions du Conseil européen, il y a le constat de positions de plus en plus convergentes, spécialement sur le volet extérieur de la migration, et le constat aussi d'une volonté d'agir de manière de plus en plus opérationnelle sur le terrain de la migration. Quelques points. Détermination à agir pour contrôler mieux les frontières extérieures de l'Union européenne. Détermination à traiter la question plus sérieusement encore du crime organisé et de la lutte contre les trafiquants qui nourrissent des business models. Troisième point, engagement d'être plus effectif en termes de retour et de réadmission. Et il y a un processus qui est engagé au départ de la Commission qui fournira des propositions sur ce sujet. Et puis, l'ensemble des leaders ont aussi affirmé que s'il était absolument essentiel de combattre fermement la migration illégale, la migration irrégulière, il était tout aussi important en parallèle d'avoir des espaces clairs pour la migration régulière et pour la migration légale. Et enfin, le débat a aussi été l'occasion d'affirmer notre solidarité avec la Pologne, qui est confrontée à l'instrumentalisation de la migration pour tenter de déstabiliser. C'est une forme d'attaque hybride. Ce n'est pas la première fois que l'Union européenne est confrontée ces dernières années à cette tentative. Ça a été le cas en Grèce il y a quelques années, ça a été le cas dans les pays baltes également. Et cette situation exceptionnelle requiert des mesures appropriées. Nous avons également eu un échange sur ces sujets-là. Enfin, nous avons aussi eu l'occasion, vous le verrez dans les conclusions, de traiter rapidement les questions de compétitivité, mais surtout en mesurant qu'il y aura un débat, et je l'espère des décisions en novembre, en Hongrie sur le sujet. Quelques sujets de politique extérieure ont également fait l'objet de notre attention. But I would like to say a few words about the summit we had yesterday. You know that yesterday we had a very important political moment because it was the first time in our history that we had a summit with the Gulf countries at the leaders level. I think this is a very powerful and practical message that we are determined to engage with the rest of the world, to strengthen the ties with the rest of the world, including with those which do not share exactly the same realities in terms of institutional or political realities, and with those who sometimes would have different opinions. With this summit, I think that we had a few goals. The first one is to made the decision that we want to upgrade our political relationship to a more strategic level. The second priority is to identify the vast potential for more cooperation in the field of trade, investment, climate change, artificial intelligence, digital revolution. In all those fields, we think and we feel that we have to cooperate much more with the rest of the world, including with those countries. And the third point is the support for multilateralism, the support for international law, for human rights, and the need to have a stronger political dialogue on some geopolitical topics, including on Ukraine. You have seen that you have strong and powerful conclusions on Ukraine and the need to respect the international law following the full-scale invasion launched by Russia, but including on the Middle East. And we had a good meeting, especially the dinner we had yesterday was the occasion to have an in-depth exchange of views on the situation in the Middle East with our counterparts in the Middle East. We also addressed the situation in Sudan. Well, these are a few points I wanted to make tonight. And once again, you see that even when we have difficult topics on the agenda, we manage to make decisions and to be united. And in those difficult circumstances, I think that when you are united and when we are united, we are more powerful.
Thank you, President. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Good evening to all of you. I also want to focus on the three main topics that we discussed today. That is the visit of President Zelensky, the Middle East, and then the topic of migration. The presence of President Zelensky today, when he was presenting his victory plan, was indeed a testament to the resilience of the Ukrainian people in face of this brutal war, a war that will soon reach its 1,000 days. And during this time, the European Union has stood by Ukraine steadfast, determined. And one thing was very clear also from today's discussion, that our support to Ukraine is unwavering and it will last for as long as it takes. This support includes the delivery, of course, of military equipment, but also now the energy support to keep the lights on and the houses warm during the winter. You know that Russia has destroyed about 75% of the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, but together with our member states, we are repairing, we are providing in reverse flow energy to Ukraine, and we are doing everything possible to decentralize the energy supply, because it is much harder for Russia to attack, for example, solar panels, and it's much easier for Ukraine to defend decentralized energy production. But our support to Ukraine also includes the economic stability of the country. As you know, Europe is working on a loan of up to 35 billion euros as part of the G7 pledge. And this loan to Ukraine will be served by the proceeds of the immobilized Russian assets. So the message here is also very clear. Russia has to pay for the damages it caused. We also were discussing our overall goal. We want to support a just and lasting peace for Ukraine, one that upholds its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in parallel, we are also preparing of what will come after peace is achieved. Of course, we will help Ukraine to reconstruct, and we are accompanying Ukraine on its path to the European Union accession. And let me focus one moment on this point. We had the first intergovernmental conference in June, so Ukraine took a huge step forward. The bilateral screening process is now ongoing, and in parallel, we have the Ukraine plan that includes crucial reforms for this accession path, and it is supported by the 50 billion in the Ukraine plan that are delivered on the achievement on reforms. So it is a 50 billion investment over 4 years, 2024 to 2027. And we see a lot of progress. Thanks to this progress, we have already disbursed over 12 billion euros, and we expect another tranche to be disbursed before the end of the year. So there is good progress. We also discussed the situation in the Middle East. We are extremely concerned about the very dangerous situation in the region. We see the escalation in Lebanon. We saw Iran's ballistic strike on Israel. All this heightens the real risks of a wider regional war. And we continued around the table to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and in Lebanon, for the unconditional release of all hostages and for an end to the conflict. Likewise, there are urgent humanitarian needs in Lebanon to meet. Beginning of October, I announced an additional 30 million euros. This comes on top of the 1 billion from the European Union in support for Lebanon from May of this year. Around the table, we also discussed the conditions for a durable peace leading to a two-state solution. And let me stress in particular one very important point. This lasting peace and a two-state solution can only be achieved with a stable, a strong and a reformed Palestinian Authority. As you know, the European Commission is working towards this goal. We have already a 400 million euro emergency support package that is in place since July. It supports at the moment being the payment of salaries or, for example, pensions or the provisions of basic services in the West Bank. But for us it's important that we can not only disperse an outstanding amount of 110 million euros later this year, but that we have a mid- and long-term support plan for the Palestinian Authority in place. This should keep the Palestinian Authority afloat until the end of the year, and this is the first step in the right direction. But, as I said, we also work round the clock to have the second step, which is a more comprehensive, multi-year program to support the Palestinian Authority in their own fiscal, economic and governance reforms, so that the budget is stabilized till 2026. For all that, we need a collective effort, politically and financially, from the international donors community. This starts with the Arab countries in the region, and of course we also need Israel on board. Whatever the current difficulties, our responsibility is to continue the work for a better future. Let me turn to migration. As you know, we discuss migration always with two legs. The one is the internal dimension, the other one is the external dimension. The Pact on Migration and Asylum is now EU law, and we are very much focused on the implementation. At the same time, we see migratory pressures that continue to evolve, so we need to continue on the work that we are doing. And I've proposed in my letter to the leaders to do this along different action points. First, indeed, there is the internal dimension. We are ready, if necessary, to accelerate the implementation of the Pact for Migration and Asylum. This pact has been constructed in a very balanced manner, responsibility and solidarity. So if we accelerate, we have to make absolutely clear that this balance is kept. But today the focus was more on the external dimension. So first of all, on the comprehensive partnerships with countries that are neighboring the European Union, third countries. We see that these partnerships are working. If you look at the central Mediterranean route, which we have been working on intensively, overall the arrivals are now down by minus 64% in the central Mediterranean. We also have been working intensively on the whole topic of visa alignment, here specifically with the Western Balkan, and this is successful too. The irregular arrivals from the Western Balkans are down by minus 77%. We also have taken the alignment with the visa policy of the European Union into the reform agenda of the Western Balkan to make sure that we are fully aligned. One of the main discussion points was a common approach to returns. Today, we see that all those who have no right to stay in the European Union, only 20% of those who have a return decision really are returned to their countries of origin. So we're working to improve this operational work, and we will soon present a new proposal, legislative proposal for that. We had one from 2018, but it is stuck in Parliament and Council, so we will come with a new proposal for returns. In this context, we also discussed innovative ways to counter illegal migration. And there are different options that have been discussed. First, the need to review the concept of a safe third country. What is a safe third country? How is it defined? Second, the idea of developing return hubs outside the European Union. It's not trivial, but it has been discussed. And very much also in focus the work with the UNHCR and IOM on what they call a whole-of-route approach. So speaking about migrants that are stranded, for example, in Northern Africa, to support UNHCR and IOM to return those migrants to their countries of origin, of course with financial support from the European Union. We also need to continue, and we've discussed that here in this room a lot, to tackle the smuggling and the human trafficking. Here the legislation is 20 years old. So we have now a new proposal on the table, and I hope we can advance swiftly on that one. This is all the topic irregular migration, mostly triggered by smugglers and traffickers. A completely different situation is the pressure that Poland is experiencing at the eastern land borders. And before Poland, it was Finland, it were the Baltic states. What we see is that Putin and Lukashenko are exerting pressure on us, trying to undermine our security and our territorial integrity. These are hybrid attacks by state actors. And therefore, Poland and other member states need to be able to protect our union from these hybrid attacks. Same goes for Finland and the Baltic states. They have to be able to take measures that are temporary and appropriate, We are working on that with Poland right now. We have been working on these measures with Finland and with the Baltic states. This has taken a broad room also in the discussion we had today on migration. Overall, it was a very constructive and comprehensive discussion that we had. Thank you.
Thank you, President. We will open the floor for a couple of questions. Please introduce yourself and the media you're working for. So start with Lawrence.
Thanks a lot. Lawrence Norman, Wall Street Journal. 2 questions to either of you. President Michel, you said that this is a difficult situation for Ukraine currently on the battlefield and facing the winter. There's a question that's been asked for a long time, which is, can Europe step up if America steps away with its military support? That is now an urgent question. What is the answer to that? Can Europe step up in a way that can deliver what President von der Leyen called a just and lasting peace? And I'd just like to ask you, neither of you commented on the killing of Sinwar by Israel. I wonder why you didn't comment and what your reaction to that is. And I would note he was killed in Rafah, which was a place the US, the EU, the UN and everyone else said Israel should not go into. Were you wrong?
No, on the first question on Ukraine and the European support, I can tell you that we are absolutely determined to support Ukraine with more military equipment, with more financial support. And you have seen the last month systematically, even when the decisions that we had to make were difficult to make, we made those decisions by unanimity in the European Council. But you're absolutely right. That we are aware that there will be elections in the United States, that probably there will be a political debate in the United States about the external affairs, including the war launched by Russia against Ukraine. But I would like to say that I have one message to the United States. If the United States and the American society, if they consider that the main challenge for them is the competition with China and the importance for a democratic society to be strong with regard with the autocratic regimes, I think that whoever will be the next president in the United States, I think the American society will not accept any signal of weakness towards an authoritarian regime like Russia. And that's why I'm confident that whatever will be the result of the elections in the United States, the transatlantic bonds will be very strong, and we will manage to defend our common values, our common democratic principles, and the respect for the UN Charter. It's my first answer. About Sinwar, just one point. We got this information when we were in the meeting. I take note, and I can tell you that indeed we know that this person is responsible for an immense suffering. He's responsible for the terrorist attack launched by Hamas on the 7th of October and for the suffering of the Palestinian people. We call on the release of all hostages, and he's also responsible for the immense suffering of the people in Gaza because of his action. And you know, I repeat again, that we call on a ceasefire. We call on more humanitarian access for the people in Gaza, but also we call on a ceasefire in Lebanon.
Yes, indeed. Sinwar was the leader of a terrorist organization, the terrorist organization of Hamas, and he was basically the mastermind behind the 7th of October with the killings, the massacres, the rapes, and the kidnapping. So his death is certainly significantly weakening Hamas.
Hashem.
Hashem Al-Bara from Al Jazeera English. On the meeting with the Gulf leaders, the statement was talking about the need to implement an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. Could you give us a sense of what is it that you think you could achieve that the Americans, for example, couldn't, particularly when it comes to the practical aspects of bringing all the key rival players, the Israelis, Hamas and Hezbollah, to agree on a ceasefire?
Yeah. No, we don't give up, and this is not new. This is not new. We have asked for months for a ceasefire in Gaza and in Lebanon. And yesterday we had one more occasion with the Gulf countries' leaders to address the situation in the region, to discuss what are the concrete actions we can try to make or to initiate in order to have a more positive impact. And I want to share a few words with you. First, we all agree that what is going on in Gaza from a humanitarian point of view is a catastrophe, is a disaster, and we have a collective responsibility to exercise our influence in order to try to convince that more humanitarian access, this is needed and this is urgent. It's one first element. We are exactly on the same page, and you know that the EU, together with our member states and together with the UN agencies, we are doing a lot, and we are doing what we can do to try to provide more humanitarian support to the people in need in Gaza. Point one. Point two, we want the respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon, and we want the respect for the UN resolutions regarding Lebanon. And that's why I repeat again that today the leaders, the European Council conclusions, we condemn the attacks against UNIFIL. And you know that many member states, European member states, they provide soldiers to this UN force. And point three, I want to be clear that yesterday we had a frank exchange of views with our colleagues from the GCC that in Europe we have a serious problem with the role played by Iran, because we can see how Iran is a threat, a nuclear threat on the one hand. Point two, Iran does not accept the existence of Israel and wants to destroy Israel. We cannot accept this Iranian behavior, and Iran is using proxies to destabilize the region, and that's why our position. We support Israel and its right to exist, its right to defend itself in line with the international law. And on the other hand, we know that we have to tackle this challenge and these security concerns posed by Iran.
This was very much the discussion today on the Middle East, indeed, that the main actor behind all this is Iran, and the proxies are Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, but also Iran supplying Russia with drones and supporting North Korea. And this was a very clear aspect in the discussions we had today. Yesterday also played, in addition to what Michel just said, a role that the European Union's role is crucial when it comes to humanitarian support and the stabilization of the region. We have increased by tenfold the humanitarian support for Gaza, working very closely, for example, with the UAE on the maritime corridor to provide access to Gaza. We have supported constantly and are still supporting the work of UNRWA. And I just referred in my statement to the support of the Palestinian Authority. So all these are elements that have been discussed yesterday, but also were part of the discussion today.
Oliver.
Hi, in the middle. Oliver again with the Austrian newspaper Die Presse. On migration, Madam President, can you explain to us what your idea of a return hub is? Is it a place where, as it seems to be the case in Albania, the Italians pick up people who are stranded in Italy, in Italian waters, they bring them there, and this is where the asylum procedure is being organized with European judges following European law, but not on European soil? Or is it really an actual return hub, which seems to be a bit the idea the Dutch seem to be looking at in Eastern Africa now, which is you basically fly people to camps somewhere outside of the EU where they wait until they can actually be returned. So what is it? Because I remember, I think in 2018, there was something called the landing platforms, Anlandeplattform, and in German, glorious word, very fashionable here. It turned out it was not possible to do it because there's no place in Northern Africa that is safe enough to organize this, or countries that are willing. So is it a place where you organize the asylum procedures or where you actually return people from?
Yes. There were three different elements discussed today for three different situations. The first one is if you look at those migrants that are in need of protection. And here the discussion is about the safe third countries, because we fully acknowledge and take responsibility for the need of protection. But this does not mean that protection has to be in the European Union only. You also can have protection in safe third countries. The discussion around the return hubs is concerning another group, those who have no right to stay in the European Union. In this context, the return hubs have been discussed. There are open questions for how long can people be there, what are you doing, for example, if a return is not possible. So, as I said, it's not trivial, but this is a topic that is being discussed. And the third element is the work of UNHCR and IOM in countries outside of the European Union, where UNHCR and IOM say they want to prevent that these migrants cross towards the European Union, but need our help and financial support to bring those migrants back to their countries of origin, because these countries where the migrants are stranded also, of course, have a lot to shoulder with the migration into these countries too.
We'll take two more questions. Emmanuel.
Bonsoir, madame. Emmanuel Beretta, Le Point. Je voudrais poser ma question en français. Dans les conclusions que j'ai lues sur les migrations, vous dites que la Pologne est dans une position effectivement un peu difficile, qu'elle doit prendre des mesures appropriées, mais en même temps, il est rappelé qu'elle doit respecter à la fois le droit européen et le droit international. Donc ma question est juridique. Est-ce que le droit international permet une suspension, même temporaire, du droit d'asile? Voilà, ça, je ne sais pas si c'est compatible.
So, as we have discussed this situation already a while ago, I think 1 or 2 years ago, with the Baltic countries, when they were under pressure, and with Finland at the beginning of this year, there is clarity on the fact that if the measures are temporary and proportionate, and in the case of Finland and the Baltic states, this was clearly seen, that this works with the legal framework that comes along with the question you were asking. So it's not the first time that we're dealing with that situation. You have to be very clear that you have a state actor that is having a hybrid attack against the country, as I've just described the point.
I think, David, you had if not, then Jorge.
Thank you very much, David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian Radio. The first question is on Ukraine. I would like to know, what do you think about the victory plan of President Zelensky? Do you support it in its entirety, or do you have some doubt, as some capitals are saying, basically, and the Secretary General of NATO, for example? The second question is on Dublin rules, because the conclusions are ambiguous and clear at the same time, as usual.
These are the conclusions, then.
Of course. And they say that the rule in place should restart to apply. And the problem for Germany, but not just Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, is Dublin and the transfer of migrants from secondary movement countries to first entry countries. So I would like to ask to the President of the Commission if you will ask them to apply Dublin rules. Thank you.
So the first topic, yes, of course, we are supporting the victory plan of President Zelensky, although, for example, it's not for me to judge on NATO accession, to make this very clear. The fields where there are the competences, full support from our side. And the second point is we have now the new pact on migration and asylum. And the point is indeed here Many of the difficulties we see today will be solved with and clarified with the new pact on migration and asylum. Therefore, there is the idea to advance its implementation. But as I said, very important is, because it's a careful balance that we have there to keep this balance in advancing. We see many of the difficulties member states have can be solved in having implemented the pact in its entirety. But at the moment being, of course, we're still working with, let's say, the old law, which makes it more difficult for the member states.
President Toon.
Un mot sur le Victory Plan pour dire que c'est surtout une présentation qui fait la clarté sur les besoins urgents des Ukrainiens, notamment sur le plan militaire et sur le plan financier. Et si nous sommes sérieux, et nous sommes sérieux, quant au fait que nous pensons qu'il faut renforcer l'Ukraine, parce que renforcer l'Ukraine, c'est se renforcer nous-mêmes, eh bien ce plan a le mérite de mettre clairement sur la table quelles sont les nécessités et quels sont les matériels et les financements qui sont nécessaires rapidement.
Thank you very much. We close the press conference here.